Okay, Skot Newman, welcome to On Some Live Design podcast. So very grateful for having you here today, and it's good to connect over oceans and many miles away. How are you doing today?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
So you're a triplet. That was really interesting for me because I've never talked to a triplet, I think. How is a life for triplet?
It was a lot of fun growing up as one of three. I'm three boys. But to be honest, people ask me like, what's it like being a triplet? I don't really know what it's like to not be a triplet. I grew up with the three of us, and that was all I really knew. So it was definitely a lot of fun. Having two of your mates, and like who happen to be your brothers, and uh, it's the only experience I've ever known, but it's definitely a fun one.
Did you have to share a lot, or were there many fights, or were you
I was
really
definitely a
friendly
few fights.
triplets?
Still are a few fights. I mean, you have three boys in the same household, and my mom passed away when I was 13, so it was just four men living together in the same house. Certainly was an interesting experience. I think it brought us a lot together in a lot of ways. We were definitely very close, but in a lot of other ways. As I may have mentioned, like, or as in a lot of other ways, it was just a very unique experience that I can't really compare to anything else.
It's beautiful. Yeah, because I come from a family of 5 kids, but I don't
Five.
have a twin or a triplet or anything, but it's very different when you have the age difference. And the love for writing, when did that start?
I think I was always writing growing up in high school and all of that. And even from when I was younger, I was writing short stories, novellas, fan fiction, all that kind of stuff. And eventually, I was writing more and more. I was going to writing workshops and stuff in high school. And when the opportunity to write a book came along, I said, this is a fantastic opportunity. Let's do it. And so, I've been writing before. This is one of the longest things I've ever written, because it's a full length book. And I sort of just pursued my passion, did what I was doing before, but now in a more like official and polished way.
And tell me a little bit about, like, were you afraid to start writing a book, or was it like you were like, yes, I'm straight jumping into that? A little bit about the process of writing it.
Yeah, sure. I think I definitely was a little reticent at first to just hop in and start doing it because first of all, it's a memoir. So I started writing it as fiction. I'd only ever really written fiction before. And at one point, one of my editors said to me, Scott, where are you getting all these crazy stories from getting deported from England to getting kidnapped in the Jordanian desert and all this other crazy stuff? And I said, Michael, um, it's true. A lot of it is just rooted in truth. This is based off of my life experience. And he said, well, then write this as a memoir. And I sort of said, 22-year-olds don't write memoirs. And he said, exactly, that's the point. So, do it, be the first. And so I started doing it, and the rest is history.
And writing a memoir, writing about yourself, how's that? What challenges
I think
were there?
it's different from what I'd done before. I'd written in the first person before, but it was fiction. And so it was interesting because I think it requires a lot of reflection, and also editing. Like it's tough to edit yourself and your own stories in your own voice, but I obviously had some great editors along the way. And for me, what the fun part about it was that I get to share my story with people. So at first it was a bit daunting, but I sort of warmed up to it, and went from there.
Because I just finished writing as well, and my first book, and it's very similar. I've traveled to like 50 plus countries, and it's always life lessons that I learned along the way.
Yeah,
And
there
like
you
you're
go.
saying, like editing yourself is like when you write, you just write, you don't want to look at it. I don't know, do you have such feeling as well? You're like, oh, like this is okay, because I write a lot about self reflection and like the lessons I've learned on the road, not so much about like adventures.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think like every chapter even has like a little lesson tucked into it. The mistakes I made, the things I could have done better along the way. Um, and when you're reading yourself, it is definitely, I think it requires a different sort of eye for detail and ability to like step back from the work, because you're not, at least when it's fiction, you can ask yourself, okay, what is this character thinking about? How does this character fit into the larger narrative? But when you're thinking about yourself and you think about yourself as a character, first of all, you can't make shit up. Like you because it's a memoir, and or like invent some new detail that brings the story together. And second of all, I think it's in some ways harder to get inside your own head and think about what you were thinking at the time, what you're thinking now. Um, and to be, you have to kill your darlings and be really brutal with yourself. And I think certainly having a good editor helps with that. But writing a memoir for me was an interesting challenge, and I enjoyed rising to the occasion.
Did you feel judged that you're writing a memoir at like age 22, where some people saying like, oh, like what are you doing, like what do you know from life?
Yeah, certainly. I think a bit at first, like one, like even not other people, but yourself. You're saying, "What? Who am I to give advice to other people, or to be sharing my own memoirs, especially so young?" But I think moving past that, I get a lot of positive feedback, and at some point, it's having a story to tell. Is there a story there? And the publishing company certainly thought there was a story there. It was the beginning, and then they believed in me, I believed in myself. And you have to ask yourself, particularly when you're writing chapter after chapter, whether this is part of your story, and whether this makes sense within the larger scheme of things, and whether it's worth it for other people to be reading about you, particularly so young, things that I was doing when I was 14, 15, 16, 17 years old. And at the end of the day, it just comes down to a simple question: is there a story here? And if so, like what's the message behind it? And if you can answer that, then and have a good answer to it, then you know that the story belongs in there. And if you can't answer that, then you have to axe it. This thing was probably double the length it is now, before editing and revisions.
So how do you answer those questions for yourself if I ask them to you?
Well, I think it's dependent upon the chapter. Like you read a chapter, you ask yourself, is this an interesting story to tell, or is it just something that might be interesting to me but isn't interesting to other people?
Okay, well,
And
let me
yeah,
rephrase the question then. So which chapter do you think would be the most interesting to read for a 22-year-old in, let me think, when in Australia at
in
this time?
Australia, well, all of them. No, I'm kidding. But one of there's some really crazy stories in there. Like I got getting kidnapped in the Jordanian desert. I had this uh, language scholarship to go and learn Arabic in Jordan when I was in high school, and I went over there to learn Arabic. One day we were out in the Great Rift Valley, in what's called Wadi Rum, which is like just miles and miles of desert. We went out like just to see it, and to like to have these like Bedouin camps basically. And we went out to the desert to stay there. And they picked us up on the side of the highway. We drove out there. We got to our little like encampment. Um, we there's like these mini mountains in the desert, and so everyone wanted to go climb this one mini mountain, and me and this other girl I was with wanted to go climb another one, which was further away. So we climbed it. We ended up, we watched this gorgeous blood orange sunset, and we ended up descending a different face of the mountain than when we ascended, just by accident. And we ran into this angry Bedouin, and he didn't want to help us at first, and then he told us to like get in his car, and we were gonna like run away in the desert. Like what we were at his mercy basically. We got in the trunk of his car. He drove us around for like an hour. We had to change cars 3 times. The whole thing. And so that certainly would be an interesting story. Getting deported from England, I was detained for 9 hours, and fingerprinted and photographed and put through the whole immigration ringer in England. I watched my boss get shot. Well, I didn't watch the bullet go in, but I was working for a guy who got shot in DC. So a lot of these are just sort of crazy sort of things that have happened to me. I'm so sorry.
What other interesting stories are there?
Well, they're getting kidnapped in Jordan. They're getting deported from England, where I was detained for 9 hours and put in a locked room with Iraqi and Syrian asylum seekers, to working for a guy who got shot while I was working for him, traveling to like 40-something countries, or close to 40 countries. For me, it's life has sort of been this great adventure, very much a sort of like seize the day, carpe diem kind of thing, where I've been fortunate to travel a lot, but even within traveling or within whatever I do, I just sort of try to seek out the interesting experiences.
How do you think you attract them? Because let's get a little bit into a writer's mindset. How do you think you attract the experiences? Because that's a very rich life at your age as well. Like, how do you think so when I sit in a meditation, I craft my future a little bit, there's creative visualization. Do you think about that? Oh, I would love an adventure, or do you journal about them, or is there any way, or does it just happen?
No, it doesn't just happen. I think nothing ever just happens. You need to make it happen and take some agency. And for me, how I've done that basically is, when I see a window of opportunity, I take it. When I had the chance I had a scholarship basically to go to Jordan and learn Arabic. I said, wow, this is a great opportunity. I'm going to take it. I don't know, basically whenever like some sort of interesting, rich there's a chapter about Chile at the end of the book. We're invited back to this Chilean guy's house, and we have this authentic Chilean barbecue with him, and how wonderful that was. For me, it's very much just like recognizing opportunities when they present themselves, and wherever they present themselves, whether that's talking to a stranger or doing something you didn't think you were going to do, or doing something you've never tried before. I think it's important to just sort of be pushed out of your comfort zone and to sort of say to yourself, if not now, when, and sort of say, why not? And just go ahead and do it. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah. And has it been like that with you for a long time, or did you train it particularly, like saying yes? Because people are training, this getting out of the comfort zone and saying yes to, or maybe it just comes from the travels. Like, where would you say you learned this skill?
I would definitely say that it's cultivated. It's not something I just woke up and started doing. I think, if anything, a lot. It's very much the book I wrote. It's a book about mistakes. It's about the things that I wish I'd done, and the things like I regret having not done more than the things I regret having done. And for me, sort of going along the way. Everything from travel stories to relationships that I maybe wish I had done some things differently in. It's always just sort of been a question of once you do something or miss out on an opportunity, don't do something, sit there kicking yourself about what might have been. You need to reflect, and I'm sure this resonates with you. You think. It might not be the next day, but it could be, the next hour, next day, years later, whatever. Take the time to ask, okay, this didn't go how I wanted, or I missed out on this opportunity to do X, Y, Z, or whatever, and say, what could I do differently in the future? And for me, one thing that I've learned is it's better, or most of the time it's better to just say yes and to try something new. If someone invites you to go hiking, or yesterday someone invited me to go do virtual reality, which I was kind of reticent about, but I went and I did it with them. Or when like you see a stranger. There's a chapter in the book, or a few chapters in the book about people who I became very close with just by going and saying hello. I think certainly reflecting on your past experiences, realizing what you could have done differently, helps you to like reframe how you think about the future.
How do you keep attention in this age of, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, all that? Do you think like books, like do people still read books?
Yeah, well, I have a problem with attention anyway. My mind's like all over the place. I think how do you keep attention? I think it definitely comes down to breaking things down. Like we live in a place with like the attention economy where so many things are constantly competing for your attention. For me, I try to like say, okay, I'm going to read for 30 minutes or an hour every day, or a page number. I'm going to read 20 pages or 50 pages or whatever every day, and then go from there. I think a lot of people, for some people, it used to be for me, a book is a daunting thing to read because you sit down and you either try to read it in one sitting or you start reading it and then you get distracted. But if you can make a habit out of it, that's one thing. And two, I think it also helps if you have something interesting. Like you have this debate, I think, in a lot of young people in their mind between, I could sit down and read a book, which feels like work, or I could watch Netflix, which feels easy, right? It comes to you.
Totally.
You have the rise of like ambient television, like just sort of garbage shows that people watch, just to have something on in the background. Not knocking any in particular, though a few certainly come to mind. And that's not to say that there's not good TV shows out there. There's certainly plenty. But I think in terms of how I keep attention, it just has to do with interest. Something has to interest me. If I'm going to read a book, it has to really pull me in the same way that a really good TV series or a really good meal, if I want to go out for food, or a really good anything else, has to pull you in. There has to be like content there. And by the same token, you learn what you do. But it's just like watch. I keep going back to TV because that's what most people spend their time doing nowadays. If you start watching like a genre of television or whatever that you don't like, it's the same thing as reading a genre of book that you don't like. You stop reading it. What I tried to do with this book too was it's only like 150 pages. I tried to make it short, sweet, to the point, and interesting, so that it could compete in some ways for people's attention with something like Netflix. Like it's not going to take you to read this anyway. It's not going to take you 40 hours out of your week or whatever. You could read this in a couple of hours, maybe not 2, 3, 4, whatever it is. And I wanted to essentially provide that entertainment and that like break from everyday life in literary form, in sort of revive in a way the book as something that's sexy and exciting and cool, rather than something that's seen as like homework.
Yeah, no, totally. It makes sense what you said about it feels daunting when it's like, oh, I have to sit down and read. But when you think about maybe 20, 30 minutes of reading and making it as a habit, that's a really good suggestion for anyone who is struggling with reading. What about writing though? Have you made it as a habit? Do you have some certain hours, rituals, whatever you do to write? Or is it like, oh, I'm sitting on the bus and I'm going to write here?
I think like there's something to be said about like writing is difficult because there are some people who sit down and then make it like a chore, whereas they say, I'm going to write 30 minutes a day, or I'm going to write for this long or this long or whatever. And for me, it's sort of been more episodic in a way. Like I write when I'm inspired to write, which it doesn't have to necessarily be every single day, but it is also a job. You have deadlines that you have to meet. You have a contract that you have to honor. And so certainly while towards the beginning, you can sort of, it is every day, but you can sort of write without necessarily routine of like you wake up at 7 a.m. and have your cup of coffee and your morning cigarette, and then you write 1,000 words or whatever. For me, it's I more sit down and I'll write 5,000 words, and then I'll get up from the computer and not look at it for a bit, and then eventually I'll come back to it. Whereas towards the end of a contract or something, when I know I have a deadline I need to meet, you sort of don't have that luxury as much. Like you need to bang out the words, and so you sit down and you do it. And certainly taking time to care for yourself between sittings is important, but certainly the further down the line you go, the closer towards a deadline that you get. You don't really have the luxury of being able to just write when you feel inspired.
How did you celebrate when the book was published, or maybe when you finished it? Did you have something like, okay, this is my reward as well? At the end, it's like, okay, I have my book written.
Well, two different things. They say a book is never finished. It's only art is never finished. It's only abandoned. I guess the first draft of this was finished in February. Another draft of it was finished in like June. The final draft was not finished until very recently before publication, and then they have the layout and everything. But certainly when I finished my first draft of the book, I had a glass of whiskey. I called a few of my close friends because I wasn't in New York at the time, and I was in Australia, and I sort of just celebrated that milestone with them. And then when the book was published, I'd already sort of built a life for myself here. I went out with some friends and I celebrated in a more old-fashioned way. But the first time, maybe it was ritualistic. I smoked a cigarette. A lucky strike. I drank a glass of whiskey, scotch, and I sort of just said, okay, we did this. Yeah, done and done,
When you say we did this, who do you refer to?
No, I'm talking about talking to myself in the mirror, like me, and obviously all the people who helped me along the way, like the editors and the publishing company and all of them. But yeah, we did this, meaning I did this.
Who's your role model when it comes to writing? Do you have someone who's, like your favorite author, or maybe there's someone else?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you asked. I think there's a lot of writers who've had great influence on me. I'm a big fan of like J.D. Salinger, wrote The Catcher in the Rye, sort of the classic coming of age story. I like Jay McInerney. He wrote Bright Lights, Big City, among others. Charles Bukowski, who's written all kinds of things. Bret Easton Ellis, who wrote Less Than Zero, which I thought was great. And then later on, American Psycho, which was a sort of very, very intelligent and also sort of crazy critique of American materialism. So yeah, I mean, if I had to point to a few literary influences, probably Bret Easton Ellis, J.D. Salinger, Jay McInerney, probably Hunter S. Thompson too, wrote The Rum Diary and Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, among others.
Is it just more their written work, or could you tell maybe a little bit what do you like as them as a writers, as personalities, and maybe like their character or how they wrote their books? Because I'm I'm a great fan of some writers that channeled their books. They're like, oh, I sat down and I just started writing this, and it just came to me out of the blue. So those were really, really my role models. And I was like, well, if I have no idea that someone's gonna come through me and write this book, in a way, like believing in that, because I read more about those writers. But what about you and the writers you like?
Certainly, I think I'm not out there trying to emulate anyone else's lifestyle. Certainly not some of the writers I've mentioned. Hunter S. Thompson was a rather loose cannon who was just insane. It was drugs and alcohol which killed him in the end. He was doing all kinds of crazy stuff. He was blowing stuff up. He was a huge gun enthusiast, which couldn't be further from what I am. Like I think all of them are different. Hunter S. Thompson, Jay McInerney, Charles Bukowski. Certainly, I think it's more the writing that I like than the lifestyles that I led. Charles Bukowski was miserable for most of his life and was an alcoholic. I don't think that you need to, chop off your ear in like Van Gogh and live a life of pain and suffering in order to write a good book.
There was one that I read about who gave all his clothes to a helper or whoever, and then he sat and wrote so he couldn't leave the apartment, so he would finish the book. I forgot who it was, but I was recently just reading about these many, like how
Oh, he
writers
was
would approach.
naked. He was naked, stranded in the
Yeah,
apartment.
yeah.
Mm.
So he couldn't go
Well,
out. So he's like, like I'm gonna finish this book because you can't go out.
it sounds hygienic. It sounds hygienic.
I mean, like many. Do you have anything how you're like, okay, I have to finish this? Okay, maybe not writing naked and giving all your clothes to someone, but anything you
Well,
do.
I would joke and say that I write naked anyway, even though I don't. I'm just kidding. But yeah, writers have all these weird rituals, like they'll set alarm clocks, or they'll not, they won't give themselves coffee or whatever until they finish a chapter or something, or they'll reward themselves at the end. For me, I don't necessarily have a particular ritual that helps me, like, that I've forced upon myself or punish myself for not finishing. I think a lot of it comes down to discipline. Like, I'll say like, maybe I'll say like, you can finish this chapter before you go for a smoke break, or you can finish this chapter before you go and eat dinner or something. But it's not like forceful punishment. It's sort of just like little things here and there. It's not one particular thing, like confiscating your own clothes that
It was a fun one.
every time. Yeah.
Yeah. What about, like the book has, you have finished writing, now the marketing, and that's a big in nowadays in this world. How do you feel about that? Because I have friends who have finished their books and they're just like, they just want to be authors. They don't want to be anything to do with marketing. They've done the book and they're ready to write the second one. And then there are those who have written and who are all also in the marketing and they love it, and they like go for podcasts and interviews and book signings and all that. How do you feel about that?
I think I'm conflicted, because, to be honest, nobody sets out to write a book so that they can go and market it afterwards. It's probably my least favorite part, and a lot of people's least favorite part of writing, just because you create the art, you finish your piece, and then at the end you have to go like sell it to people, which is not the most fun. I think the publishing company has been helpful with handling a lot of that. My publicists have been helpful with handling a lot of that. But I think, podcasts are definitely one of my favorite things to do, because you get to sit and talk to another person and sort of have a nice conversation about it. It's less about like building models or whatever, and like calculating sales reports, that kind of thing, which is totally abstracted, as you know, from the writing. But on the other hand, if you don't get yourself out there and talk about the book, nobody's going to read it. So people need to know about it. You do need to do some of these like media appearances, which are fun, but it's not, and it's obviously nice seeing people's reactions to the book when they finish it. Like, you spend all these countless hours behind the scenes doing it, and then at the end, like, other people get to share in that project. But that's rewarding. But the actual marketing element would not be my favorite part of the process.
Mm. What's about the leopard print? I saw you in a really cool leopard print pants, and those were pants or trousers. Now I'm thinking, which English should I use? What is the love for that?
I love animal print and I love leopard print. I don't know why, but I've sort of just made it my staple. I have leopard print pants, shirts. Like, sometimes I'll wear like or not wear, like, if one of my friends has like a headband or something, I'll put it on. I just love it. I think leopards are sort of these just like majestic creatures, like sort of galloping through the wild. And frankly, I just think it looks awesome, and it's unique, it's different, and it's a great conversation starter with people.
How
Like,
would
oh,
you?
I love you.
Oh, how I love your pants. Okay. That's a
How would I
conversation.
what?
Yeah, no, I thought like, how would you start a conversation about that?
Oh no, I wouldn't go up to someone and say, "Do you like my pants?" It's usually if I'm wearing leopard pants, I'm the only person at the party wearing leopard pants, and they'll come up to me and then they'll say, "Yeah, right on, thank you," and then we'll start talking. I'm not, frankly, it's just sort of a stylistic choice. It's sort of a staple. I'm kind of known as like the leopard print guy, which is sort of hilarious because there's no deeper meaning behind it. It just looks cool, and yeah, that I started doing this probably like a year ago, and it's produced a lot of great results. So,
Cool.
yeah.
I have a friend in New York City, and he had a startup, and there was something about that. If this is gonna work, he's gonna wear leopard pants for the whole year, and he did. So he had so many different leopard pants, and when I saw your pictures, it reminded me of him. So you should guys totally meet when you're back in New York
We
City.
should, yeah. When COVID is over, I'm happy to link up with him.
Yeah. If is there a chapter about New York City in your book?
Not directly. I mean, I certainly write about New York, but there's no specific New York City chapter because, frankly, I moved out of New York when I was about 14. I would always occupy a special place in my life, but after my mother passed away from a long battle with cancer, my brothers and I went off to 3 different high schools that were not in New York, and then I went off to college after that, and I was traveling a lot and living in France and Jordan and Australia and other places, and New York does, certainly some of the stories take place in New York, but it's not directly in the book just because it's the memoir starts about when I was 14, which is right when I left the city.
Mm. If there was a chapter about New York, could you like
If,
make it up now, like in 30 seconds? What would you tell about that? People love places, and since my listeners are all about like they're all over the world and they love traveling, they're always interested in like a place and then that inside view.
I would say everyone should go to New York at some point of their life if they're able. It's not a city; it's a world. It's like it's sort of this giant metropolis of 8 million people. It's larger than certain countries. And someone said like if you go to a different restaurant for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day for your entire life, you're not going to see half of what's in New York, and that's probably true. I think what's cool is you're always going to meet new people, and the benefit of that is like. Or one flip side of that is if you don't say hi to someone on the subway or in a bar or whatever, you're probably never going to see them again, just like statistically. And so it encourages you to sort of like take the time to say hi to that person, and maybe they'll say, oh, like fuck off, like, or oh, they're not interested or whatever. But at the same time, it's sort of beautiful in a way that if you don't seize on whatever opportunity is there, it will be lost forever. So it is sort of magical in that way. And I mean, there's anything you could ever want in New York, whatever your taste is, in art, fashion, music, anything, you'll have that in New York.
I love that what you said about that you could go to lunch, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then like you would have new place for the whole rest of your life, and it's like New York, new, always new.
Yeah, yes, no pun intended. Yep.
That's good. If someone who is listening this podcast and is maybe as young as you or thinking about that book, but they're like don't have that courage yet, how would you encourage someone to write their first book, or even as young as you write about their lives and experiences? Because that's very
I would
brave.
say Yeah, I mean, I would say to just do it. That you're always going to have people telling you you shouldn't be doing it, or that it doesn't make sense to do it, or leveling any other kind of criticism. But I think at some point it's your story, and if you want to tell it, then you absolutely should. And even if that's only for you, like I have a lot of friends who, they work other jobs, and they're not like writers, full-time writers. And they just sort of journal or keep a diary or whatever for themselves, and that's enough for them. For me, writing for myself wasn't enough, just because I I always knew that I wanted to share my story with a wider audience, and so and that I also wanted to just not make it like a side hobby, that I wanted it to be very much a full-time thing. So I would say just put yourself out there, and let the words go on the page, and see what people think.
That's very courageous, like to put yourself out there, and it's like, oh, my friends are gonna judge me.
Yeah, well, they are. They are. But at the same time, if you don't have confidence in yourself, how can you possibly if you don't believe in yourself, how can you possibly expect anyone else to believe in you? You're the only one who can do it. You're the only one who's going to do it, or who's capable of doing it. And if you have a story you want to tell, you should put it out there. It doesn't have to be in a book. It can be in a blog post, or a series of blog posts, or it can be in a podcast, or it can be in literally any other medium. If you have a story that you think is going to help other people, and that you think will really touch other people and resonate with them, then you absolutely should share it.
How did you come to that idea? Okay, my story is going to help someone. Like how do you know that your story is going to help someone?
Well, you never know anything for sure, but I'd written a lot of fiction before. It had tested well with various different audiences, from being just being invited to various writers workshops and all that kind of stuff growing up. That the goal of me from writing a memoir was basically like, you're not just writing it for you. If I were writing it for me, it would have been kept in a drawer in my desk. Like with each chapter, I tried to include like a lesson or a moral or something similar that would resonate with a wider audience.
Mm.
And so, you ask yourself, what's the lesson or the moral here? What did I screw up that other people could be able to learn from? Or what did I do right that other people could be able to learn from? And you say, or you even tell these stories to some people, and you see sort of how they react to them, and you see what touches people and what doesn't. And the stuff that touches people is the stuff that makes it into the book.
If you not only take your whole life, but not only your book, but your whole life, the mistake or something that you regret, but maybe afterwards you saw like, that's my biggest learning lesson.
Sorry, say that again.
So what has been your biggest learning lesson, not just with the book, but in your life? Like maybe your super down point, or you would say mistake, but then, like later on you understood that it was a learning lesson.
I don't know. I'd have to think about that. Like superlatives or having like one specific thing would be difficult, just because the book, almost every chapter is filled with things that, I wish I had done differently. But one thing, and I don't know that I would point to a specific event, though certainly there are some events described in the book from past relationships. In particular, is that there's this great quote from this guy Paul Arden, who said, "It's better to regret what you've done than what you haven't." And I think that's really resonated with me. Like sitting there kicking yourself and wondering about what might have been is definitely the worst possible feeling. Having to wonder about what could be different. If you got on that train or that plane or talked to that girl or stayed up an hour later and gotten the text in time or whatever it is. For me, I think one big thing I've regretted in life is I've much more in my life I've regretted not doing things than doing them. And I've led this sort of vibrant, interesting life, traveling all over the world and meeting all kinds of interesting characters and seeking out adventure. But the things I regret most are not the things that I've done, but the things that I've sort of let pass by.
Do you have something you would share? Something that you one book it
Sure.
would doesn't have to be the best one.
Sure. No, I'm not trying to evade the question. I would just, you said like the one thing. And I was, I don't know if I'd pointed it, like one chapter in the book is called Hendrix and Tonic. It's about one of my former relationships. I was 21, and the person the girl I was dating at the time was close to 30. And we had this really, beautiful, passionate romance that went on for a few months. But in the end, one thing I regretted was I wasn't really willing to really open up and commit fully to it, and to give it as full of a shot as it would have deserved. And I think for a lot of young people, young men in particular, it's very hard for them to open up, to be vulnerable. And certainly I'm sad that didn't work out, but I remain close friends with this person today. I'm also grateful that at a young age I learned that if you're not willing to give something a shot, and if you don't give something a shot, you'll spend quite a bit of time regretting that. Rather, it's much better to give it a shot, and then if it doesn't work out, that's fine, than to doom it from the start by never really trying in the first place. And so this relationship, I think I don't remember what chapter it is, maybe like in the late teens of the chapters. The chapter is called Hendrix and Tonic, and it's basically just about this relationship I had with this wonderful woman who, in the end, I screwed up the relationship basically by not opening up, and I wish that I wish I'd given the relationship a shot, but in the end, I didn't, and I have to live with that.
What do you think, if your mom was still around, what would she say about your book?
That's difficult to say. I think certainly she'd be very proud of me and all that I accomplished, and where I am right now. I don't know that she would be over the moon or thrilled with all of it, particularly some of the swear words. But to be honest, I think she would have laughed about it and found it amusing, and been really deeply proud of me for setting out and writing this book, which it's been a #1 new release for close to 3 weeks now, or 2 weeks, and it seems to really be getting conversations started and resonating with people in a way that I hope that it would, and I think she would be very proud of that.
Who is your biggest, like, #1 biggest fan, who's like always supporting you and then gives you that extra kick when you're like, oh, I don't think I can do this?
I'm not sure. There's definitely a few confidants or close friends. I won't use their names for their own benefit, just as I amassed larger Instagram and social media followings. I don't want people messaging them. But there's definitely a few people who, whenever I'm in like a tight spot, I'll call them, day or night, and they'll answer the phone because they know that if they call, I'm answering as well.
Mm. And if I asked you to come on a podcast in a year or maybe 2, like, what would you love to tell about then? Is there a plan for a second book, or something to do with this book? What is there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I have another one coming out in July, actually. That's fiction, but looking towards the future, I want to be working on books, journalism, and movies, perhaps podcasts too. Now that I've been on your podcast, maybe I'll start my own, and have you on as a guest. But
I'll tell you about my book.
Yeah, exactly. We could reverse the roles. So I think definitely moving forward is storytelling in some capacity, which the ways of doing that I know are books, journalism, and movies.
Super. How can people find your book, and where is the best place to buy it and get the insights?
People can find my book on Amazon, The Night Before the Morning After. It's available on Amazon. It's available on Kobo. Amazon's probably the easiest place to find it, frankly. It's available in hardcover and print. Read a copy. Let me know what you think. Leave a review on Amazon or DM me on Instagram, snewman477. I always love engaging with fans and talking with them. I'm not one of those people who just leaves all their messages unread or reads them and then ignores them. Certainly, I love engaging with my audience, with my fans, and with my critics also. So please, grab a copy of the book. Let me know what you think, and I hope to see you somewhere in the world, wherever you are. I know you said you had listeners across a bunch of different countries.
Yeah. And I see you have a cigarette brand there as well on the book cover. Is that a future plan as well?
A secret what?
A cigarette brand, like your own cigarettes?
Oh, cigarettes. Yes. Yeah. Maybe I don't know that starting a cigarette company is in my immediate future, but the design editor did quite the job with that. So maybe in another life, but I don't think for now that I'll be starting a cigarette company.
Just for the writers, maybe exclusive.
Yes. Well, what? I can't talk about it.
Yeah.
It's more on the hush hush. I'll privately message you afterwards.
Okay. Thank you so much for this lovely conversation. Well, early for me, later for you, but yeah, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This has been a lot of fun.